Welcome to Revenue Mind, where revenue leaders get real about mental health. I'm Jolie. Stick around for honest stories, practical insights, and why well-being is the real bottom line. Let's dive in. Hey everyone, welcome to the Revenue Mind podcast, a podcast where revenue leaders talk all things mental health. I'm Jolie, and with us is Heather. Welcome, Heather.
Hi, Jolie. Thanks so much for having me.
I heard you're a longtime follower. Really cool to have you on the podcast, and excited to get to know you.
Thanks. Yeah, love to listen because particularly for folks who are in revenue, mental health is a big part of your success and then being able to enjoy the rest of your life outside of work. So it's really great work that you're doing to help bring this to the forefront for folks.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Yeah, I lived in Manhattan and it was so Manhattan, it's what do you do? Boulder, Colorado, it's what startup are you working on?
Mhm.
And Nashville, it's what album are you producing? And LA, it's like what movie or what movie are you writing?
Mhm.
It's all about, what you're doing. So I really appreciate that. All right, well, you know the deal. So you ready to rumble?
Yeah, let's go.
Okay. All right, Heather. First question. What makes you you?
Um, so I think it for me actually goes back to my childhood. I had two like fairly blue collar parents, and the model that they gave me of hard work and time with family, I think are the two things that really contributed to not only my success but who I am and like what I decided to do in life, that ultimately I can control my own destiny with my hard work, but that it's really all for my family and for providing my kids a life that I maybe didn't have as a kid or couldn't have dreamed of.
How do you feel like you are giving your kids a better life?
Yeah, like socioeconomically, like so many things open up for them when your parents aren't stressed about money. And I'm, able to, because I invested in myself and work hard in tech, I'm able to give them life in like a really beautiful community. They can do any activity that they want. So it's not just about like, oh, I can give you the toy that you want, but it's also that I can raise them in a place where they're really safe. They can, lean into the hobbies and things that they're interested in, but also that I'm here. My parents had to commute a long time to give us the things that we had. They each drove like an hour plus each way. So they weren't around. And I do think that that is a big silver lining of COVID, is that I can be successful and financially stable, but also see my kids grow up. For example, when my son was a baby, I took him to daycare at 4 months because my maternity leave was over. And he would be there from like 7:30 in the morning until 5. And then we got to see him for an hour, hour and a half. Whereas my daughter was born in 2020, and it's a totally different ballgame because we're here, she was here, we were able to juggle work and having some help from family, but she was able to stay home so much longer because of the flexibility that we had post COVID.
Did you always want kids? Was that like an instinct or
No. No, if you'd asked me in my early 20s, like nope, wasn't interested, because I loved the freedom that being a young professional gave me. I lived in San Francisco. You got to do whatever you wanted. Just all the things that come with being young. I'm a millennial, so I was out all the time at bars and just having such a great time. I could never imagine that fun coming to an end. And then I met my husband and was like, ooh, yeah, maybe I do want to make a family with this person, and that's not the only way to have fun. Now, like truly a good weekend is, we made a board game together, and I watched my son win in his flag football championship, and my daughter had her dance competition. So getting to see the world through new eyes, and also knowing that it's a phase, like, I'm going to be retired and free again at some point. And for now, I'm just really enjoying the phase that I'm in.
there was essentially like a superhero moment in women's lives? It might have been the generation before us. but women were kind of expected to do everything. And
Mhm.
again, like I'm not a mom, so I don't know the dynamics, but I was curious how that plays out now and if it's still a
Yeah.
thing.
Still a thing. I think the Barbie movie and the speech that America Ferrera gave, like, perfectly encapsulates it, that not only do you have to do you gotta do it all, but you're supposed to do it and not be too thin or too fat or sad or angry. Yeah, while also frankly having a lot of the deck stacked against you, because it is still very much a patriarchal society where if you don't say golf, or you didn't go to the right fraternity or the right college and you don't know the right guy, it is harder. There is still implicit bias for sure. But frankly, I think a lot of the way that I've started to navigate that is just by being in the right room. That's not the room for me, and that's okay. There's lots of opportunity where I can be in the right room and somebody's going to maybe not even clock that I'm a woman. I've actually found that if they're excited that I'm a woman and they like me for the fact that I'm bringing something different to the team, that that's a pretty big red flag, that it shouldn't be a difference maker. They should really just be ranking me for like my talent and what my experience brings to the table.
I love that. Can you expand a little bit on what being in the right room looks like for you?
Yeah. So when I set out to find a new role, which I just landed in my new job about a month and a half ago, I put together a list of my hard requirements. And frankly, a friend who I met through Women in Sales, who is a CRO at a company and, had a really good heart to heart with me at the Women in Sales retreat, said, you have to have your non-negotiables, and that's how you're going to find out if it's your room. And not every opportunity is your opportunity. So I did that, and I looked really hard at what I need from not only the job, right? The basics of it's got to hit my comp requirement. And for me, it needs to be fully remote. But also that it was a hard line for me that the team had to be at least 50% women. My last few roles, I've been the only woman in the room. And that's tough because often when you're selling, you're the only woman in the room too. So then to not have folks understand potentially what you're going through or how to help you navigate a situation, because folks think differently. Men and women think and process very differently. It's very scientific. So for me, that was a hard line, as well as, is it a product that I care about? Do the founders have a background that aligns with one that I think is going to be successful parents? I wanted to be in a place where there were other working parents, because again, if all of a sudden I'm on D&D because my son's, in the emergency room, or if I block my calendar because today's my daughter's kindergarten graduation, you're not going to bother me because as a parent that that's off limits. So working in a place that I think where folks are in the same season of life was also really important for me. What I find interesting about where I am now is it's the most diverse team I've ever worked on, and not one person has talked about diversity. It just happens. They just hire good people.
The fact that it's not talked about is just that's how it should be. Right person, right job, right butt, right seat. Well, what race, what sexuality. That was a really interesting perspective. I was curious about, you're talking a lot about being a woman in sales, which is, I mean, I remember when I first started B2B SaaS, I won't age myself, but a few years ago, there was maybe like one AE out of like the 20 that was a woman. And I was curious what perspective you think you bring to sales. It's different. You mentioned that men and women think differently.
Mhm.
And how do you think you show up in a different way?
Yeah. Perspective wise, I got feedback recently that I'm really great at making a room feel comfortable right away. And I think it's because I bring a patience to the room that this is my deal. I'm going to be quiet. I'm going to ask the right questions. I'm going to give them space, and I'm truly going to listen. And people get that right away. They get the energy that you're putting out there when they get on a call. Whereas I found even when I was younger, and men and women, there's no difference here. Is like if you are too hungry, it is not great. right? I think the perspective that I'm bringing too is that I really do want to solve folks' problems. And if I'm not the person that can solve your problem, I often would send customers to a different prospects, I should say, to a different vendor. And then that almost always resulted in business for me in the future where they said, "Hey, you actually wanted to help me. You didn't just want to sell me. And now I need what you're selling. So let me come back to you." It happened many, many times.
Yeah, I feel like it's definitely, I mean, I don't know if I believe in karma, but I kind of believe in karma. Like something Jared Robbins said, give first, and then, I'm paraphrasing. It's give to get, but like, give and it'll come around back to you
Yep.
without expectation. And I really believe in that.
Yep.
Like sometimes we're not the right person, and that's okay. I was pitching to be a, oh man, did I overextend my reach? I was, I was pitching to be actually kind of like your role, like a fractional sales something something. And I'm like, what am I doing? I'm demand gen and I'm demand gen mops and ABX, and why am I putting myself up for this role? I mean, I could do it, but why wouldn't I give it to someone that could do it better? That'll serve the
Mm.
client better, not just because I want, more hours. And it serves the agency at the end, the agency, the client, and yourself, because you can focus on things that you're good at. You end up serving the greater good.
Yeah, it's tempting though to be selfish, right? To say like, "Ooh, I want that." Ultimately, it's letting your ego get in the way of, "I should have that." I think a lot of times for sellers, it's also the scarcity mentality of, "I have to get this." And there's so much strength and confidence to know, "Hey, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing." And it takes consistency, but I can let that go.
How did you get into sales? Like what fueled that fire?
Yeah, it is not sexy. I went to school. I was the first person in my family to go to four-year university. There was a lot of pressure to have success, and then frankly, I did not want to move home. So, I looked at the programs at my university and said, "Who has the highest placement rate after graduation?" And it was the Hospitality School of Business. So I got my degree with a business with a focus in hospitality, and I started in hotels. And I looked at the hotel. I said, "Who makes the most money?" And it was the sales team, and that was that.
That's really cool. I'd love to hear, if you're open, the lessons that you learned from your parents that you carried forward,
Yeah,
to your own family and your own journey.
yeah. I think the strongest lessons actually came out for me from my parents in times that were not good. Like, I took my first role in tech sales at a company called Bloomspot, which was like Groupon for folks who are maybe of my vintage, where like Groupon and Bloomspot and like this online deal thing was a thing. And I went there and I was selling hotels, basically ad space on Bloomspot. And I was so excited. My friend brought me over and I was laid off after 3 months. I was freshly engaged and, planning a wedding, which that's very expensive. And I felt like such a failure of, I thought I could do it and I really put it all on me when in reality, I was young and I didn't do my due diligence. The company just didn't have enough money. And the lesson I learned from that professionally is to do so much more work. But looking at my parents, I called them crying, of course. And my dad was, very wise in saying, like, "Kid, you're going to be fine. Like, you've always been fine. You worked your way through college. And it just means that like it's time for you to do your next thing." And I applied for Open Table that same day. And I was working for Open Table less than 3 weeks later. And I was with them then for 7 years. I am really lucky to have parents who, they sacrificed a ton for us. Commuting and now being an adult and commuting, like they didn't want to do that, but they wanted to, just like me, they wanted to give their kids more and raise them in a place where, we were safe and we got a good education and I could have the opportunity to go to school. But now as an adult, realizing what a sacrifice that was for them. When I moved across the country to be by my in-laws, my parents followed us. So now I'm raising my kids with all of their grandparents around and their aunts and uncles, and that's something too that I wanted to give them because my parents weren't able to live by their family. So it is something that is really great, and we're doing something that
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. So my parents live half the year in Miami. That's where we're actually originally from. And, half the year an hour and a half from us in Colorado
Mm.
in a ski town in Breckenridge. So my brother not gets them, but, he's with them half the year, and then I'm with them the other 6 months. They're typical
it's nice
snow.
shared custody.
It's your custody of my parents, yes. But it's yeah, I think in terms of, like that ins like, you can do it, like, but actually mean it. Like, my parents actually, yeah, I didn't, have the same socioeconomic growing up that you did, but I had a lot of different challenges,
Mm.
and they always used to call me "little engine that could," because starting, like, after graduation, I always had a job. Did I keep the
Mm.
job? Maybe not. But I always had a job, and that I feel like you ca
That's
I
huge.
yeah, yeah, it's with the mood disorder, it's my mom was like, "Yeah," she told me, like, maybe a few weeks ago, she's like, "Yeah, I thought we are gonna have to put you on permanent disability."
Oh.
I'm like, "Thanks." No, this was, like, a few years ago, but I think that I don't know if you can and I love your opinion on this, I don't know if you can teach that grit, that drive, that "F it, I'm gonna do this" mentality no matter how you grow up or what psychiatric issues you have
Mm.
or, what you don't have to have psychiatric issues, but, like, what challenges do you face and
Yeah.
everything in front of you, so I love to hear it.
I actually agree with you when I'm hiring, folks always say, "What do you look for?" And I say, "Number 1 is grit," because you can't teach it. And if somebody can teach it, I would love that. But I think it's something that inherently you have or you don't. I think I learned it from my parents, by seeing their example, and it wasn't something that I even realized until I was an adult that that work ethic and that grit was just in me because that's what adults did. That's what I saw adults do. But yeah, particularly for sellers, you have to have so much grit, or folks in revenue in general, right? If you're CSM, and you get off another tough call and you're fighting NRR and oh, you got another churn, you have to have grit. And it does have to come from within because your boss can't pep talk you into, now that we're working from home, into like just screwing off for the rest of the afternoon because you had a bad call, right? You have to have that fortitude to say, nope, I've got to do my admin or make my dials or keep the calls I have on my calendar because I have to keep going.
Question for you, just pivoting a little bit. When's the most burnt out you felt, maybe ever, and how did you handle it?
Yeah. So working in tech for 15 years, I've had many times where I felt the most burnt out. I think there are two times. The first is when I went back to work after my first child. Again, I had 4 months. I was a field sales rep. So I was on the road for Open Table. And, what on the road meant was like 1,000+ miles a week. We're driving everywhere. And I was nursing. So I was pumping in my car and in bathrooms and really trying to make that work because, again, please see earlier note of pressure on women. And I just really wanted him to not have formula, which was wild. And then a sleep regression came, and my son was not sleeping. And he and I were actually talking about this the other night. And I was just up in the middle of the night crying because he literally would not sleep, and having to still go out and really get beat up. Open Table was a hard sell at that time because there was so much competition and really having to prove value. And doing it in person is very different than someone's awful to you on Zoom, and then you're like, "Great, I'm gonna hang that up and maybe go cry." Being in person is another level, and restaurateurs are ruthless. So that was time 1. And then time 2 was a totally different era. It was, in my last gig, I had a big company, sorry, a big team, and they needed a lot, and I kinda knew this wasn't my place anymore, and I was really trying to make it work. I really wanted it to work because the folks that were on my team, I genuinely, like, really, really cared about. And thankfully, I have a really great partner, and my husband said, "Hey, like, they're gonna be okay without you. You're not gonna be okay if you keep doing this. Like, your kids, you're ending the day, and you're kind of in a catatonic state. What are you gonna do if you look back and say, 'Damn, I could have changed that, and I could have done something different.'" And that's where, again, like, clicking and saying, "This isn't my room anymore. I gotta get out of here," was the right thing to do, because now my life is very different. My energy is very different, my mood. I can enjoy making a board game with my kids on a weekday, whereas in my previous role, I just didn't have anything left to give anybody else at the end of the day.
How did you exit or take care of yourself to get through it?
Yeah. Whew, with the baby, unfortunately, that was just a time is gonna fix it. I can't you can't make a baby sleep. But again, my husband was a really great partner, and we figured out, a schedule where we would take turns getting up with the baby and giving him bottles rather than me having to nurse him all the time. How did I come out of it in my last role was really realizing that I had been in this situation before, because I think everybody goes through this where you're at a job and you realize, "Ooh, I'm done, but I want to make it work because I see the hope, and maybe we're going to sell and or IPO, and I really believe in the product." Which all those things can be true, while at the same time, it not being the place that you should be anymore. And candidly, having my husband call out, like, we've done this before, because I am, with grit, I'm like, "Oh, I'm a fighter. I can, like, make this work, and I'll get back to happy." And he just pointed to the examples from previous roles where he was like, "Hey, you wrote it out for too long and you weren't happy. Don't you wanna get back to happy sooner? Because it's in your control." So having that partner that reminded me that, like, "Dude, you're a badass. You could work wherever you wanna work. You don't have to stay in a place where, it's not the right fit for you anymore," was really great. And for some people, maybe you don't have a partner. Maybe that's your best friend that's giving you that reminder, or your mentor. So I would say that the one thing is to just make sure you have people who are in your corner that you can talk to those situations about.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I think it can really come from anywhere. How do you think that you took those lessons and taught I know you're, VP of sales, like, how do you think you teach that to your team now, what you learned?
Yeah. One is around expectations. So when I first start with a team, I have, maybe cheesy, maybe not, a presentation where I say, like, "Hey, here's my story. Here are my expectations of you, and then here's what you can expect of me." So that as we're on a journey together, ideally everyone's playing from the same deck, right? So if along the way what they need changes, or what our expectations are change, we're communicating that. I have had a lot of team members where thankfully I create a safe enough environment where they come to me and they say, "Hey, I don't think I can do it here anymore. I don't think that this is, maybe I don't want to be in sales anymore." Right? That's always the easiest, where it's like, "Okay, great. I can help you. You're not going to go and be an AE at another company." But where they're trying to assess what to do, and I think as a leader, it's one of the most important things that you can do is be a sounding board, and not just think of the company and think about, "Hey, oh, I might lose this person." If you put people first and what their needs are as people, you're not only going to have higher retention on your team and likely people you can hire at your next company, but also you're going to have a team where people feel really psychologically safe and they can come to you. And maybe as a manager, you can help solve the problem that they have that they feel like isn't solvable in their current role. Maybe it is something that you can fix, and maybe it's not, but you need to make the space for them to be able to talk about it.
Oh, for sure. And I'm sure I can speak for a lot of people where we've all had the opposite. For example, one of my very first jobs at an agency, I stayed there a year. The girl after me ran out of the office crying after a month because our boss was so abusive. And I mean, at 25, that can really either it's really formative. I think the bosses that you have really shape you into the leader that you become.
Mhm. For the negative and the positive, where you're like, I don't want to copy that behavior. So
Yeah.
I always say, as a seller and as a leader, I like to steal the things that look good and work well. So, frankly, like creating that safe space is something that I got from a boss at Open Table, where he and I were friends, and he did also make a space though for me to try different things there. I tried a partnership role while also being an AE, and I tried, working with different teams. He made that space, but then also said eventually, like, I think you're done here. Like, what are you going to do? And then was really formative in helping me find the next role that really launched like my enterprise SaaS career.
That's a good boss.
Hmm.
I think I might have told the story. I mean, since it's been 5 months, I can't remember. But, so I actually had a boss that said he gave me a month's heads up that our biggest client was leaving. And he said, "Look, start looking now. You have a month." And people don't that doesn't happen often.
Hmm.
And I'm still grateful for him to this day because that's actually started my consulting business because of that. I started, getting clients and very slowly but surely, but, reaching out to different agencies that I'd worked with or just kind of exploring. And a year later, I have equivalent to full time
That's
with
incredible.
consulting. Thank you. I appreciate that. And I thank him because he gave me that heads up. But it does, to your point, it does take a lot of grit, full time
Mhm.
consulting, kind of anything you do. I want to get your opinion on this too. Sometimes there are things you can't beat. Do you have an example of that you're willing to share, or example from
Mhm.
a friend, or just kind of your opinion? Something that crosses my mind a lot.
Yeah, I think right now, AI is the thing that I think a lot of folks, we're seeing all these layoffs happen and it's scary. So that's an example of, we can't beat it. Not that we should, but it's a scary environment. Ultimately, it's the economy. And there are always going to be external conditions that you can't beat, right? So, for example, a few companies ago, it was a really competitive space. When I had first started there, we had so much money and it was so great, and then the economy shifted and people just didn't need what we were selling anymore, and it was competitive and other people were doing it better. And there are situations where it doesn't matter how great you are at your job, there are external forces that you cannot control. Related to the economy, I have lots of friends who are in the public sector and funding is just going away and their jobs are just disappearing. That is not because they're not good at their jobs, and that's not because they don't have grit. It's because it's just a factor that's bigger than you and bigger than the company and bigger than your control. I know we talked a little bit about COVID. COVID is another thing where the biggest lesson that I got from it is you cannot know what to expect ever. The way that it changed our lives, no one could have expected it. And if you are ready to kind of ride with the unexpected and make the best of the situation, or do whatever you can to survive, that's the thing that I've learned from COVID. I'm living a life that I never no, if you told me 10 years ago that I would be on the East Coast and kind of in the middle of nowhere, I would have said you're a liar. I will never leave California. But I learned a lot from, again, these external factors that I couldn't control.
Thank you so much again for being a listener on the show and for coming on. Where can we find you?
Oh, yeah. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm Heather Bell, and I'm currently working for Vector. So if you are in demand gen, I'll make the shameless plug as a seller. If you're in demand gen or leading a marketing team, we're an incredible partner for folks who are looking to do contact level marketing.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Amber.
Yeah, thanks, Jolie.
That's a wrap for Revenue Mind, where we cut the BS and spotlight mental health and revenue leadership. I'm Jolie. We're minding you, your mindset is your competitive edge. Thanks for listening. See you next time.